If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless. Thomas Jefferson. Following is a timeline demonstrating when and how a private central banking cartel got control of the government, the people, and the assets of the United States. Each fact is supported by official sources. Source documents are available at www.anticorruptionsociety.com under the tab Source Documents. 1913. With the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, a private foreign banking cartel was made the fiscal agent of the United States. Source document, Representative McFadden, Congressional Record, June 1932. From the website of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, quote, "The entry of the United States into World War I added to the responsibilities of the young Federal Reserve Bank. It helped finance U.S. military expenditures by becoming the fiscal agent of the federal government." 1920. Congress handed the U.S. Treasury over to the same private banking cartel via the Independent Treasury Act. Source document, Independent Treasury Act, 1920. 1921. The Council on Foreign Relations was founded to direct the media. Paul Warburg was its first director. Warburg also drafted the Federal Reserve Act and became the Fed's first governor. Paul Warburg was an agent for the Rothschilds banking dynasty. 1925. The United States Corporation Company was chartered in perpetuity in Florida by its fiscal agent. Source document, Articles of Incorporation, United States Corporation Company. This company was created without the approval of Congress, nor the knowledge and authority of the American people. Note, in 1925, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York had offices on Cedar Street and on Broadway, both cited in the Articles of Incorporation. Source document, Articles of Incorporation, United States Corporation Company. The United States Corporation Company created a maximum of 100 shares of stock. Source document, Articles of Incorporation, United States Corporation Company. The Articles of Incorporation revealed the names of 3 individuals who held only 5 shares. The other shareholders were not identified. 1920s. The U.S. Treasury was raided by the private Federal Reserve Bank, who then caused the Great Depression and bankrupted the United States Corporation Company. Source document, Representative Lewis McFadden. Congressional Record, June 1932. 1933. A state of emergency was claimed, and Congress gave the President unconstitutional emergency powers. Source document, Congressional Record, March 1933. On behalf of the private Federal Reserve, President Roosevelt confiscated the people's gold and forced all to use the Federal Reserve notes from then on. Source document, Congressional Record, March 1933. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation. Therefore, their notes are privately owned currency. The people and the property of the United States was hypothecated and placed unlawfully in a public trust. Source document, Representative Trafficant, Congressional Record, March 1993. Hypothecate means to pledge as security without delivery of possession. 1933. The Internal Revenue Service was chartered in Delaware as a private corporation. It is not a division of the U.S. Treasury. Source document, Internal Revenue Service Corporate Charter, 1933. The United States is a private corporation with unnamed stockholders. A private corporation is its fiscal agent. A private corporation owns and circulates the currency we are forced to use. A private corporation expects us to pay them taxes. The U.S. CEO, the President, has maintained unconstitutional emergency powers for the past 80 years. Source document Senate Report 93549 and Continuation of the National Emergency 2012-2013. Quote, all United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status in name only under emergency war powers, with the constitutional Republican form of government now dissolved. Source document, Representative Trafficant, Congressional Record, March 1993. Today, as has been demonstrated, the United States is just a corporate franchised network represented by their all-caps names such as State of Ohio. Corporate statutes have replaced laws. A corporate statute is a rule of a corporation given the force of law by the consent of the parties. This consent generally requires a signed contract. From Judge Dale, author of The Great American Adventure, page 102, quote, the federal and state governments are not real. They are privately owned corporations called governments, and the law is nothing more than their corporate regulations called statutes, unquote. As corporations have no souls to save nor bodies to incarcerate, they are just dead legal structures. A dead legal structure cannot represent living people nor obligate living people to laws. Therefore, a corporation cannot be a sovereign government. It can only be a legal structure for commercial contracts, which is all the so-called United States government franchise network is. From Judge Dale's The Great American Adventure, page 10, quote, all of this deception is compounded by the refusal of ordinary Americans to realize, know, or understand that it is this secrecy and duplicity of privately owned corporations being surreptitiously portrayed as American agencies and government that they have come together to fleece the American people. For more information, read Judge Dale's The Great American Adventure. Free online at anticorruptionsociety.com. Page 1, Articles of Incorporation, filed 7/15/25, 7 pages. Page 2, Certificate of Incorporation of United States Corporation Company, filed in Office Secretary of State of the State of Florida this 15th day of July, A.D. 1925, signed by H. Clay Crawford, Secretary of State. United States Corporation Company, Dover, Chicago, Albany, St. Louis, Jersey City, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. International Corporation Company, Rue de la Paix, Paris. Executive Office, 65 Cedar Street, New York City. Page 3, Received July 15, 1925, State of Florida. Certificate of Incorporation of United States Corporation Company. Number 1. The name of the corporation is United States Corporation Company. Number 2. The nature of the business and the objects and purposes proposed to be transacted, promoted, or carried on by the corporation are as follows: to prepare or cause to be prepared and procure to be filed, recorded, registered, published, issued, or granted in accordance with law, articles or certificates of incorporation, applications for letter patent, charters, and other instruments relating to the incorporation and organization of corporations and joint stock companies. To prepare or cause to be prepared and procured to be filed, recorded, registered, published, issued, or granted, certificates, reports, statements, applications for licenses to do business, or other instruments in relation to domestic and foreign corporations, companies, or associations. To provide and maintain domiciliary and other offices and facilities for corporations, companies, and associations, and to act as agent in charge thereof, and upon whom process against or any official notices to any such corporation, company, or association may be served or given, and for any other lawful purpose. To act as the fiscal or transfer agent of or registrar of the stock or securities issued by any public or private corporation, and in such capacity to receive and disburse money. Page 4. To transfer, register, countersign, issue, and deliver certificates of stocks, bonds, or other evidences of indebtedness, and to act as agent of any corporation, foreign or domestic, for any lawful purpose. To carry on the business of an appraisal and audit company, and in connection therewith, to make examinations and appraisals of the business and property of corporations and individuals, to examine and audit their books and accounts, and to make reports and certificates in respect thereof. To publish and deal in books, periodicals, pamphlets, legal forms, and blanks of all kinds. To acquire by purchase or otherwise, and to hold for investment or otherwise, to use, sell, lease, or dispose of real estate and real property, and any interest, estate, or rights therein. To acquire by purchase, subscription, or otherwise, and to hold for investment or otherwise, and to use, sell, or dispose of shares of stock, bonds, or any other obligations or securities of any corporation, domestic or foreign. To aid in any manner any corporation whose shares of stock, bonds, or other obligations are held, or in any manner guaranteed by the company, or in which the company is in any way interested, and to do any other acts or things for the preservation, protection, improvement, or enhancement of the value of any such shares of stock, bonds, or other obligations, or to do any acts or things designed for any such purpose. And while owner of any such shares of stock, bonds, or other obligations, to exercise all the rights, powers, and privileges of ownership thereof, and to exercise any and all voting powers thereon. To acquire by purchase or otherwise, and to hold, own, use, grant licenses in respect to, or otherwise turn to, account, or dispose of any copyrights, trademarks, inventions, patent rights, and letters patent of the United States or of any other country. The business of the corporation is from time to time to do any one or more of the acts and things herein set forth, and it may conduct business in the state of Florida, other states, the District of Columbia, the territories and colonies of the United States, and in foreign countries, have one or more offices out of the state of Florida, and hold, purchase, mortgage, and convey real and personal property with or without of the state of Florida. Number 3. The maximum number of shares which this corporation is authorized to have outstanding at any one time is 100, each of which shares shall have a par value of $100. Number 4. The amount of capital with which the corporation will begin business is $500. Number 5. The corporation is to have perpetual existence. Number 6. The principal office of the corporation shall be located in the Centennial Building, Tallahassee, Leon County. Number 7. The number of directors shall be 3. Number 8. The names of the directors who shall hold office for the first year of the corporation's existence, or until their successors are elected and have qualified, and their post office addresses are as follows. Page 6. Harry O. Coughlin, 150 Broadway, New York, New York. Samuel B. Howard, 150 Broadway, New York, New York. Arthur W. Britton, 150 Broadway, New York, New York. Number 9. The names and post office addresses of the subscribers of this certificate and the number of shares of stock which each agrees to take are as follows. Louis B. Gunther, 150 Broadway, New York, New York, 2 shares. Samuel B. Howard, 150 Broadway, New York, New York, 2 shares. Arthur W. Britton, 150 Broadway, New York, New York, 1 share. Number 10. The directors and stockholders shall have power to hold their meetings and to have one or more offices and to keep the books of the corporation, except the original or duplicate stock ledger, outside of the state of Florida, at such place or places as from time to time may be designated by the bylaws or by resolution of the board. The directors shall have power, without the assent or vote of the stockholders, to make and alter bylaws of the corporation, to fix the times for the declaration and payment of dividends, and to fix and vary the amount to be reserved as working capital, to determine the use and disposition of any surplus or net profits over and above the capital stock paid in, and in their discretion the directors may use and apply any such surplus or accumulated profits in purchasing or acquiring the bonds or other obligations or shares of the capital stock of the corporation to such an extent and in such manner and upon such terms as the directors shall deem expedient. But shares of such capital stock so purchased or acquired may be resold unless such shares shall have been retired for the purposes of decreasing the corporation's capital stock as provided by law. Page 7. We, the undersigned, being each of the original subscribers to capital stock hereinbefore named, do hereby associate for the purpose of establishing a corporation pursuant to the Corporation Law, State of Florida, 1925. Witness our hands and seals the 7th day of July, 1925. Louis H. Gunther, Samuel B. Howard, Arthur W. Britton. In presence of Samuel G. Wood, as to all. State of New York, County of New York, July 7th, A.D., 1925, personally appeared before me, a notary public, in and for New York County, duly authorized to take acknowledgments. Louis H. Gunther, Samuel B. Howard, and Arthur W. Britton, to me known and known to me to be the persons described in and who executed the foregoing instruments, who each acknowledged to me that he executed the same freely and voluntarily as and for his act and deed for the uses and purposes therein expressed. Witness my hand and official seal the day and year in this certificate first above written at New York, New York County, New York. Samuel G. Wood, Notary Public. My commission expires March 30th, 1927. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless. Thomas Jefferson. Following is a timeline demonstrating when and how a private central banking cartel got control of the people and the assets of the United States. Each fact is supported by official sources. Source documents, SD, are available at www.anticorruptionsociety.com under the tab Source Documents. 1913. With the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, a private foreign banking cartel was made the fiscal agent of the United States. Source document, Representative McFadden, Congressional Record, June 1932. From the website of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, quote, "The entry of the United States into World War I added to the responsibilities of the young Federal Reserve Bank. It helped finance U.S. military expenditures by becoming the fiscal agent of the federal government." (1920) Congress handed the U.S. Treasury over to the same private banking cartel via the Independent Treasury Act. Source document, Independent Treasury Act, 1920. 1921. The Council on Foreign Relations was founded to direct the media. Paul Warburg was its first director. Warburg also drafted the Federal Reserve Act and became the Fed's first governor. Paul Warburg was an agent for the foreign Rothschild banking dynasty. 1925. The United States Corporation Company was chartered in Florida by its fiscal agent. Source document, Articles of Incorporation, United States Corporation Company, 1925. This company was created without the approval of Congress nor the knowledge and authority of the American people. Note, in 1925, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York had offices on Cedar Street and on Broadway, both cited in the Articles of Incorporation. Source document, Articles of Incorporation, United States Corporation Company, 1925. 1920s. The U.S. Treasury was raided by the private Federal Reserve bankers, who then caused the Great Depression and bankrupted the United States Corporation Company. Source document, Representative McFadden, Congressional Record, June 1932. 1933. A state of emergency was claimed, and Congress gave the President unconstitutional emergency powers. Source document, Congressional Record, March 1933. On behalf of the private Federal Reserve, President Roosevelt confiscated the people's gold and forced all to use their private currency, the Federal Reserve note, from then on. Source document, Congressional Record, March 1933. The property and the people of the United States was hypothecated and placed unlawfully in a public trust. Source document, Representative Trafficant, Congressional Record, March 1993. The Internal Revenue Service was chartered in Delaware as a private corporation. It is not a division of the U.S. Treasury. Source document, Internal Revenue Service Corporate Charter, 1933. The U.S. President, CEO, has maintained unconstitutional dictatorial emergency power for the last 80 years. Source documents, Senate Report 93549, 1973, and Continuation of the National Emergency, 2012-2013. Today, as has been demonstrated, the United States is just a corporate franchised network represented by their all-cap names, such as State of Ohio. Corporate statutes have replaced laws. A corporate statute is a rule of a corporation given the force of law by the consent of the people. This consent generally requires a signed contract. As corporations have no souls to save nor bodies to incarcerate, they are just dead legal structures. A dead legal structure cannot represent living people nor obligate them to laws. Therefore, a corporation cannot be a sovereign government. It can only be a legal structure for commercial contracts, which is all the so-called United States government franchise network is. From Judge Dale's The Great American Adventure, page 10, quote, "All of this deception is compounded by the refusal of ordinary Americans to realize, know, or understand that it is this secrecy and duplicity of privately owned corporations being surreptitiously, falsely, portrayed as American agencies and government that have come together to fleece the American people." For more information, read Judge Dale's The Great American Adventure, Secrets of America, free online at anticorruptionsociety.com.
Let it first be understood that all systems are interconnected, and with this understanding, one can then discern the greater complexity of organization that exists in both the temporal and the non-temporal. The complex can thus be refined down to a simple cause, while the simple can be brought to its most complicated determination. Commerce is the great metonymy for the energy that is put into and taken out of this portion of the galactic system. The terms that will be shown to the listener are related to the sea, and most will take this to mean the ocean. This is true on only one level, because the greater truth is that every term is more directly related to the ocean or sea of space. It may be difficult to comprehend, because the controlling factions of this world want everyone to remain ignorant while believing the Earth and its inhabitants to be the know-all be-all of the entire universe. But there is an operation of life and systems occurring throughout the cosmos that is unfathomable to the comprehension of the human intellect. Humans being shocked at the prospect of intelligent life outside of Earth, or others laughing at the prospect of alien life, are wholly unaware of how small their place is in the entire schematic of the operation. The Marine Admiralty Maritime Acts or Law, which is the law of the sea, and the banking systems, are intent on keeping the distribution of the system in line with the energetic operations of life and death. The living feed the dead, so that the dead can be reborn into the living again in an endless cycle. The energy that we put into the sea through commerce is the main medium of transport to those in power, and is how this entire process continues to function. It is the intention of this work to make the listener aware of the terminology that is used in commerce, terms that the public is familiar with, but unfamiliar with in the true severity of their import. A tender is a boat for communication between ship and shore, and a ship that usually provides supplies to other ships as well. In the world of commerce as it stands, tender is something that is used as an official medium of payment. A medium is someone or something that serves as an intermediary between the living and the dead, and this makes sense when one understands that the purpose of commerce is to charge the dead so that they can be reborn. Tender is the middle tool that acts as this form of communication. A tender is also known as something which is used to propose a payment with, and the words are used on government legal tender promissory notes, erroneously referred to as money. To propose something is to be in the positive position with the offer, hence pro for positive and pose being a synonymous word for position. If the offer is accepted, the positions of polarity have been reversed between proposer and acceptor. The medium of exchange has thus been diminished of its own capacity through the energy used in this interaction, which is why all legal tender promissory notes lose their value with each use, just like a battery that loses its charge with each cycle of its protons and electrons through the neutron. This process has been called inflation, which leads us to our second term. Inflation is in basic definition a progressive increase in the prices of goods and services. This is related to the ocean or sea with an inflatable craft, which is usually a rescue boat of some kind used as a last resort after a shipwreck, for instance. People the world over have missed the point of the terms, that the purpose of bankrupting the nations was to serve as an indicator that this age is now using an inflatable craft which needs to be blown up with more fresh air currency to keep it afloat. This, of course, can only last for a short time until either a legitimate rescue arrives or the surviving crew members eventually all die. If one considers the larger planets as the ships and smaller planets as the rescue boats, this may make more sense to the listener. A cutter is a boat for communication between ship and shore. Merchant ships were called revenue cutters, and is where the term to cut a check is derived. To cut something is to reduce the amount or number of that thing. Here is the etymology for the word check. A deal is a plank of softwood, fir, or pine board on the deck of a ship. In commerce, it is known as a particular instance of buying or selling. To get a good deal was to refer to the area where certain goods were sold on the decks of merchant ships in times past. The deals were quite literally made on the deals of the ship. This is also why in card games you have a deck of cards where each player gets a deal. In a business, a salesman will also cut you a deal, because on a ship's deck, deals needed to be cut, just like any other wood floor that is accomplished in the carpentry trade. A merchant is a business person engaged in retail trade. This is from the French word mer, meaning sea, ocean, whereby the word mermaid is derived, hence sea maiden. The suffix word chant means a repetitive song in which as many syllables as necessary are assigned to a single tone. Hence, a merchant is someone who sings a repetitive sea song or song of the sea, because they wanted repeat customers. This is true when we follow the term repeat, which is linked etymologically to the word for feather. How? The English term repeat is cognate with the Latin repetere, meaning to return, from the Latin prefix re and petere, translated as to seek, attack, claim, desire. The Latin word petere gave rise to the Old High German fide, meaning wing, whereby wing is linked with the Sanskrit veti for it blows. The wind is what blows and was needed for the ships to continue on their merchant journeys. The Old High German fide is where the federal government derives its name from, which is the central power of government. And although not a part of the government is where the private institution known as the Federal Reserve takes its moniker from as well. Added to all of this, in sea terminology, to feather is to turn an oar while rowing, and a proper English synonym for feather is square, which can also be used to indicate the turning of an oar while rowing. A square is also by definition someone who doesn't understand what is going on, and the word square can also be correctly used as a verb to indicate that someone is being paid to settle a debt. Hence the phrase, "we're all squared up." Humanity is being shown through the enormous amount of square symbolism that they have no clue as to what this operation is about, and that part of the scheme is about paying off a debt to someone or something. That something is the feeding of Saturn through the feathering of energy into the square of that planet. As a transitive verb, the etymology of the word pay comes from the Latin piccare, which meant pitch, smear with pitch. Pitch was a heavy viscid substance like tar that was used to seal up the hulls of ships from water leakage. Of course, a tar is a noun for a man who serves as a sailor. In commerce terms, to pitch something is to offer it for sale from place to place, which is the reason for there being sales pitches. That's not the last of it. The word feather is linked with the word for father, and this is the hidden etymology of that. First of all, by taking out the first letter E in the word feather, we are left with father, while the English feather is linked back with the Old English feather and Dutch vader, whereby the correlating Dutch word vader means father. When we go back to the Sanskrit veti, meaning it blows, linked with the High German fide, We find an exact match in German with the German word Vati that translates into English as father. Isn't it quite interesting to note that this word is found in the first 4 letters of the great Roman institution known as the Vatican, which through this connection would mean the dog father, since can is the Spanish word for dog, as related to the dog star of Sirius, where the false gods that now control this world came from. Dog spelled backwards is God, and Vatican therefore also means the Godfather, which is why the Pope is also known as the Papa, since the Spanish Pope quite literally means Papa, and the basis of the word father is linked throughout the etymology for the term Pope. Add to this the fact that the related Italian term vedere means see, and is part of the reason why the Pope is also referred to as the Holy See. These organizations are also telling us who the father of this operation is: Saturn, Satan, since the eagle is the square feather, father, ether, or, that brought the light of duality knowledge to our species. Float, as in cash register float, is to be afloat, to stay on a liquid surface and not sink. It is also the time interval between the deposit of a check in a bank and its payment. Hence, when one is not afloat financially, they are said to be drowning in debt. That's when the loan sharks are sent after them. Float is derived from the Middle English float, meaning boat, and Old English flota, meaning ship. A sale is the general activity of selling, whereby the exact phonetic correlate is sale, which is why there are salesmen, which were and are necessary for the proper operation of a merchant sea vessel or business. When the sails are up, people will blow their legal tender fresh air currency on them so that the ship business can continue moving forward. That's the luck of the sail that gets a windfall, which is a word that means a sudden happening that brings good fortune, as a sudden opportunity to make money, and is the reason that the phonetic of merchandise is in actuality merchant dice. By definition, liquidation is the termination of a business operation by using its assets to discharge its liabilities, and is also known as the murder of a competitor. The first definition of liquidate is to get rid of someone who may be a threat by killing them, and in secondary terms is to eliminate something by paying off debts. The prefix word liquid gives us the automatic link to the waters of the sea. More esoterically, to liquidate something is to phonetically liquid-date them, which is why all ships that sit in their berth have what is called a certificate of manifest that is dated. Therefore, it is liquidated. This would be known as your birthday, where you came through the hips of the mother ship. The anagram of hips is ship, and the mother ship is the moon, which is the egg that brought you to port. The moon of sin that each of us was grown in before being docked in our port by going through the mother's vaginal canal. A canal is a long, narrow strip of water made for boats. When going to work, people report for duty because humans are the liquidated ships made mostly of water that have been eliminated to pay off an endless debt. We are brought to port and then docked by the doctor, and we now hold an off-ice office of duty where we have a post, which is why there is the post office. This is shown by the Dutch port, and French port, which both mean postage. Revenue is known as the entire amount of income before any deductions are made, which is according to government the income that is due to taxation. Revenue is a commerce term of the sea, as shown by the word revenuer, which is a revenue officer or boat. The word revenue is linked with sexuality as shown through the etymology, with revenue being derived from the Latin revenire or revenere, depending on your interpretation of the Latin pronunciation, with venere meaning to come. Hence, revenere would mean to come again. Come is a vulgar term for a sexual orgasm, which is why the powers that be like to include this word in such commercial terms as income. The English word venire is a law term that means to summon a group of people for jury service. This is related to the religious term venial for a forgivable transgression, or one that is pardonable. That's why there are venial sins. The Latin venia or venia meant a pardon and the granting of a privilege which people now know as a license, because the word license is rooted in licentiousness, which is indulgence in sensuality, and to be given license is to be given the motive to disregard any forms of self-restraint at the cost and expense of others and the environment. The archaic term venery translates as hunting and sexual intercourse, which is where the term venereal disease is derived, because commerce is about the hunt, where people hunt for a good deal, and it's about killing the competition, and why there are executors or execution sales. Continuing with the connections is the English word vendu, which means a sail, and a sail is phonetically a sail, because the Latin venti and ventus or venti and ventus both mean wind, the wind that's needed to blow the sails. The Italian vento also means wind, while the French law word vente gives us a sail, contract of sale. Of course, this is about selling us into slavery through the womb, which is shown in the English venter, meaning womb, that came from the same Latin spelling, and the related Latin masculine noun vanus, meaning sale, purchase, since Venus represents the clams, money, bucks, used during our purchase. Venus is the Roman goddess of sexual love and generation, and the term venter is why the English language has in commercial terms a vendor or vendors. Humans are sold into commercial slavery, since venal means to be a mercenary, someone who is purchasable or bribable, while the Latin venalici translates as slave dealer. We are hunted in the chase during each purchase. This is the pure chase, where they make a clean kill, because to deprive something of everything that they have is to clean them out. They've taken you to the cleaners, which in esoteric terms means that after death, your mind and all of your known conscious history of this life will be erased and wiped out. The cache of your hard drive mind will be deleted, and then you will have a clean slate. This is why no one remembers where they have come from or where they are going. This is a fact, and one that makes many humans angry upon hearing it, because it is the truth that is easier to deny than face. We have been double-crossed as shown by a final relation that will be proven out with the Italian venti, Portuguese vint, and French vin, all translated as 20. The number 20 in Roman numerals is written as XX. We have been double-crossed and sold into this system. Cash is money in the form of bills or coins. The phonetic word is cash, which is a secret store of valuables or money. By reinterpreting the English, we might say that this could also be pronounced as catch. Cash is catch, or to make a good catch and then store it in the cache. The cache, as already outlined, is also the storage of our memories and experiences that is wiped out after death before we are brought back into the system again. This is where we are put on ice again, because we are frozen assets that have been taken off ice during life and then put back on ice during death. That's the reason for the saying, cold hard cash. A synonym for cash is bury, which is where valuable items are kept because we are being held prisoner as valuable items. The dead are buried in boxes, and cash originally meant money box, and the English language derived the word from the French casse, meaning broke, which is why when you are out of money energy, you are said to be broke. Cash was also instituted from the Italian cassa for cash, case, and the Latin capsa, meaning locker, box, satchel, church nave. Capsa is synonymous with the Latin arca, meaning ark, coffin, money, wealth, cage, cell, because the Ark of the Covenant is truly about the recharging of cells in the moon that brings the debt back to life. Another Latin word for church nave is capsi, since the nave is the central area of the church, which is esoterically the vaginal canal that leads to the dead savior that rescues the dead from the clutches of sin, which is the Akkadian god of the moon, since sin is actually the moon and the celestial body of regeneration. This is what the church is symbolizing as you walk down the aisle of its ship, since the Latin navis means ship, and the Spanish nave also translates as ship, vessel for sailing on the sea. During generation, we are linked into this reality through the naval cord, with the word nave showing as being derived from the Old English nafella for naval. The military navy or naval fleet is connected to this as shown by the Latin navale, meaning dock, shipway, and naval is an English adjective to represent that which is connected with or used in the navy. We are the seamen fish that they seize in the seas of space and then put in their box, since the Latin box from the 1879 Lewis and Short Dictionary means fish, while the Latin capsa for box is a derivative of the verb capere, translated as seize, take hold, capture, that is related in the etymology to the English word for heave. At death we are recaptured, seized, and taken hold of to go to heaven, heaven. The English heave is manifested from the Middle English heaven, Old English heban, and is akin to the Old High German hevan, meaning to lift, and Latin capere, to take. To the beings who control this world, it is like shooting fish in a barrel. Cash flow is the excess amount of cash revenues over cash outlays in a given period of time. This is a necessary commerce term that indicates the cash flow of the sea. Banks are the financial institutions that accept deposits and channel money into lending activities. By the terminology of the sea, banks are the sloping edges of land that exist beside a body of water, like the river banks. The banks direct the currents or the currency of the cash flow. The banks are where the cash of dead are buried or stored, giving credence to the ancient accounts of dead spirits being stored in the moon. The debt or dead are deposited into the banks, and it is known as a cash deposit, whereby the debt or dead are then put on trial in front of a judge, as shown by the word bench. The court system is entirely based upon the principle of money and the energy that we create in commerce. So when someone states that it is the court of Queen's Bench, for example, they are actually saying that it is the court of the Queen's Bank. Right now we are in the game of life because we are not buried in the banks, but when we die, that is what happens. We become a security deposit and take a seat on the bench because we are taken out of the game to receive a rest. This is why a police, officer will arrest someone when they need to receive a charge for a debt or sin, because they need to be given a rest between their trial. Branches are the separate divisions of the main financial institution, which in oceanic terms are the streams or rivers that are connected to a larger one. This would be akin to the rivers that flow into the ocean, or in biology, the arteries and vessels of blood that flow to the heart. All of our energy is flowing to one main source, and this is repeatedly shown in the words and terms. The branches of the tree of life are also the ribs connected to our spine that is caged the heart, earth, hence the rib cage. The implication of just this alone is something that is incredibly important to think upon. Currency is known as the metal or paper medium of exchange that is presently used. The phonetic for currency is current sea, or the current of the sea. Fractional currency is paper money that is valued in denominations of less than $1. This means that all of your paper money, no matter what denomination is written on it, 5, 10, 20, 50, etc., is all worth less than $1. The first recorded instance of this in the United States occurred in the years 1863 to 1876, which was a 10-cent fractional currency issued during the Civil War due to shortages of precious metals. As one can see, the words fractional currency were clearly listed right on the note, something that is not done today, which is a deception of those in power towards the public, seeing that all notes called money now are fractional reserve currency that are valued at a significant decrease from the basic monetary unit, which is 100 cents in many countries. The basic monetary unit would mean that 100 cents is valued at 100 cents, not 10 cents or 4 cents or nothing. This is, of course, the direction that we have been heading since the charges of the current C for the currents of E, currents E, have been increasing steadily. Isis, or this symbol in the esoteric symbolism, has been reawakening Osiris through our commerce currency charges. Current is the dominant flow of running water. This is why people stay current on their monthly payments, for fear of being taken down by the undercurrent. A rebate is to give a reduction in the price during a sale. The phonetic of this word is rebate, which is to bait the customer again and get them on board by hooking them with a more alluring deal. Liquid assets are assets in the form of cash or easily convertible into cash, which is likened to liquid water. Frozen assets are assets that are not available for current use and is easily linked with frozen water. We become the frozen assets when we are put back on ice and stored in the banks in the afterlife. Interest is commonly known as a fixed charge for borrowing money. The prefix word inter means to bury, while the suffix is rest. When someone has died, they are said to be at rest, and therefore we have the word interest, to bury those at rest. This would relate to the cache of goods that is buried in the banks, river banks. The latter three letters of est gives us a further indication of the lunar and solar occult meanings, since in French and est in Italian are both the words for east, which is where the sun rises from its death each morning. It was buried in the west and rises in the east. Hence, in the morning, the sun appears to be rising from its burial place in the dawn of the east, giving us another indication for the true meaning of interest. This is also why people each day say good morning to each other, thus indicating the rising of the sun that came out of its burial chamber. The moon, Isis, takes the charges of souls to soul, as a pledge or payment to the sun. The sun rises because of the payment of the dead debt, and this is why there is so much sun symbolism in governments, major corporations, and secret societies throughout the world. Sun sacrifice has not gone away. It has simply become occulted. Mortgage is from the two French words mort, meaning death, and gage, meaning pledge. A mortgage is a death pledge, hence the commonly used saying to sign one's life away. They ask for a down payment to show good faith to the dead who are being recharged in the banks, since this transaction is sexually oriented, as shown by the French word for mortgage, which is hypothèque. This is from the Greek hypotheke, for security of a debt, from hypo, below, sub, and theke, case, receptacle, scabbard, while the French thèque is from the Latin theca, meaning case, box, vagina. It may be difficult to imagine, but the dead are reborn in the moon egg that is dropped each month by a woman, and this egg is their lifeboat that has come to rescue them. This already happened to each one of us, and will continue to occur in this prison indefinitely, because humanity is not prepared to accept the implications of this tremendous and daunting information. It is not a mistake that mortgages are for homes, because the pledge to the dead is about the luck, chance that each soul will have inside of their new home of birth, in whatever moon egg that happens to find them. This happens in hell, as shown by the Norwegian word hell, meaning success, luck. It's the luck of the die, because everyone who dies goes into the case, box, vagina, to try and find another home. That's the true biblical meaning of the fall, as determined through the etymology of the word case, from the Latin casus, for fall, chance, adventure, fortune, collapse. It's the light of luck as shown by the German hell, meaning bright, light, and the Middle Dutch Luc for luck, related to the Latin luce for by daylight. It's the light of Lucifer, being given to the dead, where more children are born in the moon, with the French fer, meaning iron, being instituted from the Latin fer, meaning bearing, one that bears. This is why Lucifer is known as the light bearer, which is the light of the moon that has been pledged and paid to the dead. It gives the dead the life blood, which is filled with iron, which becomes our blood iron bars of DNA. And this entire operation is filled with irony, because it is, as Dante stated, a divine comedy, whereby irony is a synonym for sarcasm, and the word sarcasm is derived from the ancient Greek sarx, meaning flesh, because we are born into our prison of flesh with its iron cells of blood biology. On a more simplistic note, it's also odd that the French language needed to have a completely separate word for mortgage when the word mortgage itself is from two French words. But this simply shows again the need for those in control of humanity to disguise the truth in every possible manner. An undertaking is a promise or a guarantee given in any piece of work that is undertaken or attempted. As a noun, it is known as the trade of a funeral director, because in esoteric terms, this is the undertaking of the dead by the false light of the moon. An undertaker is one whose business it is to prepare the dead for burial. A stiff is the dead body of a human being, and also someone who refuses to pay or tip. Commerce and death go hand in hand. Capital is known as the assets available for use in the production of further assets. One phrase that has been used over and over again to reflect this is, "You need money to make money." Capital is furthermore wealth in the form of money or property owned by a person or business, while governments and corporations refer to their human-based capital as human resources of economic value. Interestingly enough, capital is also definitionally known as a seat of government. In language, a capital letter is one of the large alphabetic characters used as the first letter in writing or in printing proper names, and is sometimes used in writing for emphasis. The Latin word capital translates into English as capital crime, punishment, loss of life or civil rights, and the phonetic of capital turns into cap it all, which is the all caps name that is associated with a human being that is tied to every definition of capital. This is why people are considered to be human resources and receive identification from the government that shows your name in all capital letters, thus indicating that you have lost both your life and all of your rights and have been turned into liquidated capital. It takes a tremendous feat of immaturity for those who call themselves adults to be shown and told about this information, and then to simply scoff at it, as if it all means nothing. Nevertheless, all capital energy is funneled to the main source of this construct, and this energy is used for its own agenda. This is why there are capital cities, because these serve as a metonymy for the central hub of the state, province, or territory where all of the funds or energy is channeled to. This is the reason for the saying, "All roads lead to Rome." To earn is to attain a gain on some commercial or business transaction, such as earning a salary or garnering wages. The phonetic homophone is earn, which links with the word interest. Those who are buried inter and at rest in their urn. This is why in capitalism one is able to earn interest. This is not a stretch of the imagination whatsoever, as even the etymology of the word earn links us with these concepts. Autumn is the harvest time, and farmers reap what they have earned through their hard work. One noted obsolete term synonymous with earn that can be found in several dictionaries is the word grieve. This is most likely an alteration of the word yearn, which has the word earn within it without the letter Y. Esoterically, this is in reflection to the harvester of souls who comes to reap each of us into the afterlife and see what it has earned. There is even a minutia of sadistic humor in this connection, since humans tend to ask the question why when their loved ones have departed, and the letter Y is the one that is taken away in the word yearn to bring it down to earn. To utter is to articulate either verbally or with a cry, shout, or noise. Amazingly enough, the word utter is by general definition to put as currency into circulation. Circulation is the orderly movement of things through a circuit which constitutes the flow, and with flow we have our link to the sea with its flowing waterways. A withdrawal is known as the act of taking out money or other capital. This comes from the prefix word with, meaning against, such as a fight with his brother, and the suffix word draw, meaning inhale, gain. Therefore, to withdraw is to be against gain. The word drawl from withdrawal is phonetically pronounced drawl, which means to speak or utter slowly with vowels greatly prolonged. This is the general depiction of how a zombie speaks, because the great metaphor of the governments, corporations, secret societies, and rulers of this operation is to tell us that we are the living dead, or zombies that are controlled in this energetic operation. Salt is a white crystalline form of most often sodium chloride, used to season and preserve food. A salt is also a sailor, and there we have our immediate connection to the sea, which is obviously salt water. This is where the common phrase comes from of a man being worth his salt, because he or she is able to generate a charge within the energetic system. The etymology of the word salt is derived from the Latin sal, meaning salt, and is why we have monetary salaries and sales. In the military, people salute each other, or in the public realm give greetings and salutations. In religious terms, mankind is told that they will receive salvation for their sins, which would come from sal aman. Salomon is the Latin word for David because Saturn is worshipped by the occult elite as the Star of David, the line of kings that Jesus is said to be produced from. David, in biblical terms, was the second king of Israel in succession to Saul, and a lesser-known secondary meaning of the noun David is that of an underdog. The underdog is always expected to lose because of its serious disadvantages, but as many story writers have told it, the underdog always comes in near the end of the game to prove everyone wrong by winning the day. Those who do not understand the astronomical aspects of the allegories will remain stupefied while worshipping fictional characters of their own imagining. Cashier is a noun used to indicate an employee of a bank who receives and pays out money. Today, and for quite some time, there has not been one cashier doing their job, because no actual money is being received or paid out, since fractional reserve notes are not money, but only a promise to pay money sometime in the future. This abstract concept is incredibly difficult for many people to comprehend, but is true nonetheless. Just so it is not overlooked, a cashier is also a person responsible for receiving payments for goods and services, such as in a shop or a restaurant. As a verb that was derived from service on a ship, to cashier someone is to dismiss them from service, and especially to dismiss them in disgrace. This is why to label someone a cashier as a noun only tells half of the story. They need to create the living action of their work, the verb, which is to cashier each customer. And once the transaction is complete, the customer has been cashiered or dismissed from the service that the business provided them, with complete disgrace. To kite something is to increase the amount of a check fraudulently. A kite is also an object flown in the wind that is tied to the end of a string. Usually the object is flag-like, which indicates the fraud known as a false flag. This is the reason that the enormous fraud in government and banking is so closely linked with the numerous false flag operations that occur throughout the world. A flag is also known as a jack, and a jack is also by definition a small worthless amount, and a man who serves as a sailor. To borrow is to burrow, as the etymology shows, again linking us with the burying of the dead, and the suffix word rowing, bor rowing, gives us our link to the law of the sea. The term borrow came out of the Middle English borwen, from the Old English borgian, which was akin to the Old English bjorgan, meaning to preserve. To preserve something is to conceal it or bury it. And the word bury is linked with the Old English bjorgan, since bury was derived from the Old English bergan, that was linked to the Old High German berkan. This is also why in commerce we have bargains or bargain bins. To summarize, to borrow something is to take it from its burrowed place of preservation and use it temporarily. It is therefore lent to someone, which is why there is the religious period in the spring called Lent, which is a period of 40 days from Ash Wednesday to Holy Saturday. It is Ash Wednesday because this is where the ashes of the dead have been earned. The number 40 is extraordinarily significant to the controllers during each Passover, including the significant Passover between the ages, which is why the Keystone XL pipeline is a significant project of theirs right now. XL is simply the Roman numerals for 40, and a keystone is the central building block at the top of an arch, or vault. A vault is a burial chamber or tomb, and these projects both signify the end of the age that has been completed and the burrowing of this world as we now know it. The prefix bur is Norwegian and Swedish for cage, and o is French for water, hence to cage water, which is why our body is made of mostly water that is caged by its iron blood cells. The first two letters of a count, AC, is the abbreviation for alternating current, and the final word is count, giving us the alternating current count, which is electricity that is likened to the ebb and flow of the tides that are brought about by the moon. This is also known as a meter count, and the etymology of the word meter is linked with many other words that are tied with the word moon. The prefix of re means to do it again, and port for a ship's docking station, otherwise known as a harbor, pier, or wharf. To report would mean to dock again. Amortization is in practical terms known as the payment of an obligation in a series of transfers. Esoterically, we are going through a series of spiritual and physical transfers to pay back an endless debt, because an amortization is also the liquidation of a debt. The prefix amor is in Roman mythology the god of love, the counterpart of the Greek eros, as shown by the German word amor, meaning eros, Cupid, and the Turkish amor, for god of love, Cupid. The Latin amor translates as love, Cupid, affair. Many other languages also use the word amor to reflect this definition. Mort is from the French mort, meaning death, and Iza means prostitute in Spanish. Hence, amortization would mean that in death we are prostituted by the god of love to continue a series of transfers for the liquidation of a debt. Savings is a matter of faith. To be saved or to receive salvation is to have savings. Without savings, one is said to be doomed. When people receive a windfall or get money either from their job or from an unexpected source, they all too often pronounce, "Thank God," because they feel that the money has saved them. It has nothing to do with God. This is the occult reason for monetary units that are buried in the banks being called savings, because these monetary faith units are charges that are given to the dead who will be resurrected from this given pledge of power. This is the true basis for the United States currency pronouncing on its notes that, "In God we trust." Balance is where the boat finds its level and its passengers are no longer in danger of being thrown overboard. In accounting, one has to balance their books, while in a store, the cash in and cash out involves a float that needs to be balanced each day, lest the business go underwater. Debtor is a phonetic for dead oar, meaning someone who is no longer able to be an oarsman. A Latin word for criminal, debtor, was columnarius, which also meant someone who is condemned at columna maenea, which in Rome at the time of Cicero was a column used to post the names of debtors by their creditors. More esoterically, the column is indicating the spinal column, which has our signature of debt written upon it. The Latin columnarium translates as pillar tax, tax on house pillars, which was applied to fancy houses with pillars, and since the body is considered a fancy house by those in power, with a pillar called a spine, the governments and rulers of the world feel that they have a right to tax everything that it does. Banks or accountants keep track of their numbers using columnar books, as related to the column, and shown by the Latin columnar, meaning marble quarry, stone quarry. A quarry in basic English definition is a person who is the aim of an attack, fair game, prey, by a hostile person or influence. It is something that is hunted or caught for food. Banks, governments, and corporations do not pick their words and terms carelessly. All of this is by design and done with specific intent and purpose. A draft is the depth of a vessel's keel below the surface of water. It is also known as a current of air, which would be necessary to move a merchant vessel. In banking, a draft is a document that orders the payment of money from one bank to another one. According to nearly any dictionary, credit is belief. It is faith. Also by definition, credit is an accounting entry acknowledging income or capital items, and since all fiat let it be so currency is in actuality credit, accounting entries are all that exist, which is why the books are always balanced. If this were not true, then why are people paying back credit with credit? Belief and faith are the only forms of currency that are recognized in this unsustainable system, and it would be wise to recognize the significance of these statements. A trader is someone who buys and sells because they are interested in short-term profits. Phonetically spoken, a trader is a trader. This is because anyone who is willing to create a duality of destruction and competitive retribution against their fellow species is a traitor, not only to everyone that they seek to manipulate, but is also a self-traitor. Look at the stock market. Everyone involved in this scheme is called a traitor, and for good reason. The capital name that nearly everyone exists under connects everyone to this exchange to be traded as capital stock on the stock market, or the ET mark. Humanity is considered the stock or animals that are kept for use and profit, which is why we are human resources. We are chained by the bonds of this prison, which is why there are both stocks and bonds. As related to the sea, a stock is the crosspiece that is on an anchor. The other parts of an anchor give more of the sea-related parts of the game away, since a bill is the end of the anchor hook, and a fluke is the part of the anchor that fastens into the ground. Some sails are just flukes, while others are worked for with more difficulty. The crown is also involved, since this is the middle bottom curved portion of the anchor. Nothing has been left out. The logistics of this are taken care of through the parliamentary, congressional, and court systems, because stock is also known as a base for soup. What? Soup? What does that have to do with the court systems or parliamentary and congressional law? Simply because stock is also known as broth, and the Latin word ius translates into English as law, right, soup, gravy, broth, ordinance, decree, canon. That's the gravy train, which is a windfall, or an exploited source of easy money. Use is furthermore where the word justice is derived, and broth gives us the reasoning behind the secret society brotherhoods, that shape and monitor this operation. In law dictionaries, there is a term known as jus abutendi, that is a Roman and civil law decreeing the right of a property owner to make full use of said property, even to the extent of wasting or destroying it. This is the reason that the controllers are so intent on owning everything and declaring it to be under their dominion. To destroy it all at their own whims and discretions. I'll end this segment with arguably the greatest duality of them all, heaven and hell. This is seen in the words hired and fired. To be hired is to actually be hired or lifted up to a higher state of being or life, while to be fired is to be fired, sent to hell and lowered in status, position, lifestyle, security, comfort, and everything good that heaven is claimed to be.
I leave you with one word. Mother Nature and Father Time can't get together, it seems, because by the time we learn the game, we're too old to make the team. Bless you.
The Mediterranean Sea, 5th century BC, a great commercial network created by the Phoenicians. In hundreds of archaeological sites scattered around the Mediterranean, objects are often found that are completely extraneous to local civilizations and cultures. An Egyptian amulet in Greece, a Greek vase in Africa, a huge multitude of goods moving from one country to another and another had to be transported and traded in some sort of systematic way. And it is the Phoenicians, with their tall headdresses, their formidable ships, their skills in trading, and their courage on the high seas, who made a name for themselves in this pursuit. We'll see how the Phoenicians took on a diverse civilization of cultures and wove them together to become the undisputed lords of the sea. The Phoenicians originally came from what is modern-day Lebanon. They were organized into city-states, the most important of which was Tyre, whose magnificent Roman ruins are still standing. The easiest way for Phoenicians to increase their prosperity was by contact with other peoples, and the quickest route to new lands and cultures was the Mediterranean. They soon became outstanding sailors and astute traders, indeed the very best. They learned to recognize products that people wanted to acquire and those they wanted to trade. And they started sailing and trading as far back as the 2nd millennium BC. To support their trade, they set up ports and founded colonies, built warehouses, and created a network of routes that touched on neighboring countries such as Egypt, Greece, the Magna Graecia, and Carthage in North Africa. Then they went on to reach Sardinia, the Mediterranean and Atlantic coasts of Spain, and farther south, along the coast as far as Senegal, and north to England and Ireland. A network of this size with hundreds of colonies and thousands of ships had to be well coordinated. For years, scholars speculated as to how the Phoenicians were able to communicate with each other in those remote times, to organize warehouses and trade in such a variety of goods. It was the discovery of this sarcophagus of the Phoenician king Ahiram, which dates back to the 13th century BC, that enabled archaeologists to understand the reasons for such great organizational skills. Engraved on the sarcophagus is the most ancient example of writing in alphabet form. It is composed of letters and not hieroglyphics. The Phoenicians were the first to invent an alphabet, a factor that proved indispensable in establishing their great trading network. We can get an idea of how extraordinary this innovation was from this comparison. On the right, we see two Egyptian hieroglyphics, and on the left, two letters from the Phoenician alphabet, an M and an H. By assembling these letters, the reader now didn't have to interpret a concept represented by a hieroglyphic or picture. He had a specific code that always remained the same and had the same meaning for whomever was reading it. The commanders of the Phoenician fleets had to have many skills. They not only needed expert knowledge of the sea and foreign lands, but they had to know the art of trading as well, what to buy, what to sell. One precious cargo of theirs was the mythical cedar of Lebanon, an excellent timber for building sturdy cargo vessels and warships. The timber could be bought in Baalbek, situated in the mountains that formed a backdrop to the Phoenician cities in Lebanon. In the Hellenistic period, the city of Baalbek was known as Heliopolis, City of the Sun. By studying the meaning of these swastikas and other evidence, such as the different colors of columns at this site, archaeologists discovered that the enormous temple that dominated the city was dedicated to the sun god, after which the city was named. But why were the columns painted in different colors? The mystery can be solved when the columns are linked to the cardinal points. The dark columns were placed to the west, while the lighter colored columns were set to the east. They were supposed to represent life and death, the rising and setting of the sun. In 60 AD, the cella of the sun god was the most important construction in the entire sacred area, with 54 columns over 60 feet high, more than 6 feet in diameter. Having loaded the trunks of cedar wood onto carts, the traders would return to the coast where their ships awaited them. In the Bible, Ezekiel mentions that the Phoenician city of Byblus, which also lies in Lebanon, was the biggest naval shipyard in ancient times. Crossing the seas was not an easy matter, even with a good ship. This was one of the reasons why help from the gods was sought throughout the Mediterranean. These precious bronze statues covered in gold leaf have a strange headdress. It is a libad, which is typical of the Phoenicians. The statues have been found in great quantities in Byblus. They were votive objects used to invoke the favor of the gods. They were found at one of the most important places of worship for the Phoenician religion, the Temple of the Obelisks. In Byblus and other Phoenician cities, the remains of numerous Phoenician cargo ships have been found. The typical ship was 65 feet long and over 16 feet wide, large enough to carry a great deal of the precious cedar, as well as luxurious fabrics dyed with a reddish-purple pigment known as murex. The Phoenicians took their name from these fabrics. Phoenix, Phoenician, comes from the Greek word phoin, or red. This precious cargo could have been exchanged in any port. But a wise fleet's commander might seek out a product that could be worth its weight in gold, a kouros. A kouros is an exemplary model of harmony and proportion in the male body. Many of these statues, dating from the Archaic period, were discovered on the island of Rhodes near Comoros. Excavations nearby unearthed these celebrated vases, which are known as the vases of Ficalura. This concentration of arts and craftsmanship on this island can be explained by the fact that Rhodes lay at the hub of important trading routes. To break up the long sea journeys, the ships sailed from island to island, and Rhodes was an obligatory port of call. Here is the dry dock or coffin of the colony, which has been preserved intact for millennia. Here the Greeks were offered the fabrics and cedar for their ships. In return, the Phoenicians were given exquisitely decorated pottery and objects from all over Greece, including beautiful Greek statues like this one, as well as bronzes produced in the Magna Graecia, which may have been ordered by a rich Phoenician resident in a distant colony. Statues like this ephebe in bronze, or the famous Youth of Mothia, were found during excavations in the ancient Phoenician colony of Mothia in Sicily. The statues testify to the level of Phoenician trading in the Mediterranean, a veritable cross-cultural exchange. The ship, now loaded with vases, statues, and jewels, continues its journey to the west. It sails past the Pillars of Hercules at the Isthmus of Gibraltar and heads south along the Atlantic beaches of Africa between Morocco and Guinea. The Phoenicians were the only people brave enough to venture into the Atlantic. Ancient peoples were terrified of passing the Pillars of Hercules because they believed that beyond lay the end of the world. What was it that pushed the Phoenicians so far? The Greek historian Herodotus documented it in his writings. It was gold. The Phoenicians unload the merchandise and lay it out on the shore. Then they go back on board their ships and send up smoke. The locals see the smoke and place the gold that they are offering in exchange beside the merchandise. Then they withdraw. The Phoenicians descend from their ships and examine it. If they calculate that the quantity of gold corresponds to the value of their merchandise, they take it and leave. Otherwise, they go back to their ships and wait until they are satisfied. The African peoples were very taken with the showy Eastern goods and quite indifferent to the yellow metal that was found in such abundance there. This was the great bargain for the Phoenicians, leaving inexpensive pottery and jewelry and setting off again with gold. The ship would now head north. Excavations in England and Ireland have revealed that the Phoenicians reached even these far-off lands. Numerous finds have indicated that in exchange for pottery and jewelry, the northern peoples gave tin, a metal that was in great demand for producing bronze and the other alloys used by the Phoenicians and Greeks. Ireland was the most northerly landing point for Phoenician voyages, and having traded their goods, the sailors could now make the return journey. The trips always held the portent of danger. In the storms of the North Atlantic, the brave commanders would safeguard their ships and cargoes by tying themselves to the bow so that they could see more clearly and avoid the cliffs. It was from there that they gave instructions to the crew. If they were lucky enough to make it through, they would head south to the Phoenician colony of Cadiz. Here the Phoenicians bought iron and paid for it with gold. Then they traveled on to Majorca, and from there to the rich colonies of Sardinia. It's here that an archaeological dig uncovered a gold mine, not a seam or stratum of gold, but a huge array of precious gold jewelry, now on display in the Archaeological Museum in Cagliari. Since Sardinia has never had gold deposits, the precious metal must have come from Africa on Phoenician ships. In the Sardinian colonies, the Phoenicians themselves worked the gold into the most exclusive forms, modeling it in small molds. Sardinia was the largest producer of Phoenician crafts, especially in the field of glassmaking. They made ointment jars to hold balms and perfumes, necklaces, and characteristic amulets. For centuries, it was believed the Phoenicians invented glass. While science no longer holds with this theory, they definitely were peerless masters in the field of glassmaking. For many years, archaeologists pondered the reason for the ambiguous smile on grinning masks like this one. They also didn't know the reason for the long arms on certain statues. Only after years of research did they find the answers. The masks were used to ward off evil spirits from the tombs. As for the statues, they were related to the more esoteric aspects of Phoenician medicine. They were offered to the gods to invoke a speedy recovery from illness. The affliction to be cured was in the exact spot touched by the hands, almost as if the sick person wanted to remind the gods what needed to be healed. Walls and the sea. A combination like this generally implies that we are dealing with a Phoenician emporium or trading center. The archaeological site of Tharos in Sardinia may not have any large architectural structures still standing, but it is one of the most eloquent when it comes to ancient urban design. Here, Phoenicians would have traded the iron, lead, and part of the tin and gold they had for precious jewels. Tharos was one of the largest producers of jewelry of the period. Among the many Phoenician remains here is a completely extraneous round construction called a nuraghe that was typical of the Pelites, the ancient inhabitants of Sardinia who were conquered by the Phoenicians. This is how the village would have looked about 3,000 years ago. The Nuraghic civilization is very ancient, dating back to the 2nd millennium BC. Their settlements were very compact, with narrow winding streets which made it easier to defend the village from enemy incursions. The houses of the ancient Sardinian people were a combination of fortified towers, granaries, workshops, and dwelling places. There was no distinction made between the function of the various constructions. There was only the nuraghe, a unit where productive and family activities were carried out around a fire, the main focus of the house. But what exactly does the word nuraghe mean? It seems to come from the way their dwelling was constructed. In the ancient local language, nur meant mound. As we can see, the walls of the constructions are thicker than the dwelling area. They were built with heavy stones heaped on top of each other without the use of mortar. The constructions reached heights of more than 65 feet without using any lime, and they are indeed mound-like. Phoenician ports, like this one in Nora, all had something in common. They were situated near promontories. In this way, ships could be moored on both sides of the promontories, creating a larger dock area. The only thing the Phoenicians looked for was to be able to land quickly, get their business done, and then set sail again. These are the foundations of the Phoenician quarter in Nora. Although it's worlds away from the Romans' concept of living, with the Romans preferring large, orderly quarters equipped with many services and amenities, the Phoenicians did share the Romans' love of thermal baths. The baths here in Nora are decorated with rich mosaics. The theater here is also quite spectacular. Dating from the 2nd century AD, it is one of the most fascinating monuments in all of Sardinia. From this Spartan 5th century Phoenician port, the fleet would have set sail again, now laden down with even more jewels and precious objects. One of the greatest archaeological mysteries regarded the port of Carthage, queen of the Mediterranean, the most powerful of all Phoenician colonies. The Greek historian Appian, a native of Alexandria in Egypt, tells us that the port had 2 harbors, the rectangular commercial port and the round military harbor with an island in the center. However, in modern times, no place seemed to correspond to that description until in the 19th century, the writer René Chateaubriand noticed these 2 lagoons near the bay of Le Cram were very similar in shape to the ports mentioned, he realized that this was Carthage. This discovery led to a heated debate, which was only concluded with excavations carried out in 1974. A British team excavating on the circular island found evidence that confirmed Chateaubriand's theory. The bustling port of Carthage was the largest and most modern port in pre-Roman times. Warships would pass from the commercial port through a narrow passage to the military harbor. Merchant ships were forbidden to pass beyond this limit. The ship that is entering the port is a trireme with 3 tiers of rowers, though the Carthaginians also had quadriremes and quinquiremes, which can be compared to modern-day battleships. All the ships returning from war missions, by which Carthage dominated the Mediterranean and protected Phoenician trading routes, were moored in this port. It was circular, with a round island in the center, known as the Island of the Admiralty. There were dry docks both on the island and in the outer perimeter of the port. On the summit of the island was the Pavilion of the Admiralty, from which the supreme commander of the fleet gave military orders. A bugler and a herald armed with flags controlled the traffic of ships in the port. If a trumpeter signaled to turn left, there had to be room enough to make the maneuver. The basin of water in which the ships moved was thus over 300 feet wide, the same diameter as the Island of the Admiralty on our right. There were 30 berths in the center and 140 on the outside. Since some of the very deep central moorings could hold 2 ships, there could have been 200 ships in the port at one time. The military port in Carthage was always packed in winter, since bad weather made it dangerous for the ships to be out on rough seas. Thus, there was a tendency to avoid war during this time, and this was a good time to service the ships. The trireme would be pulled up onto dry land over the slightly sloping terrain of the island. Planks of wood set crossways ensured that the ships kept their grip on the slipway. At the entrance to the area, Ionic columns set at sea level gave the impression of a portico to make this military site look more elegant. The ships were also given special aesthetic treatment. Phoenician ships typically had an eye painted on the bow that was supposed to strike fear into their enemies. A warship differed from a cargo ship in that it had oars and oarsmen that enabled it to move very quickly. As well as being outstanding sailors, the Phoenicians excelled at shipbuilding. They mass-produced ships and replaced the vessels sunk by their enemies with great speed. All the parts of the ship were clearly marked by different letters and kept ready for quick assembly. In this way, they could build an entire fleet in a short period of time. The busy commercial part of Carthage, however, was the Bursa, the Acropolis of Carthage. This is where the major transactions, the trades and selling of jewelry and glasswork brought from Sardinia, would take place. These goods were in great demand in Carthage. On their way home, the ships might also sail up the Nile to the grand and mysterious kingdoms of the pharaohs. Despite the fact that Egyptians followed the cult of the hereafter, the royalty adored earthly treasures. The Phoenicians would have traded the jewelry from Pharos for linen, a hard-wearing fabric that only the Egyptians knew how to make. This material was indispensable for the robust sails used on Phoenician ships. They might also have purchased rare and exotic goods greatly sought after at the Persian court, namely monkeys and crocodiles. Finally, completing the loop and reaching the town of Tyre, they could sell the exotic animals to the Persians and the linen to their fellow countrymen. They'd be left with gold, silver, and a lot more money than they would have paid for the cedar back in Baalbek. Through their travels and their trading, their ancient wheeling and dealing, The Phoenicians formed links with most of the known world at that time, enabling a variety of peoples to share the best that distant cultures had to offer. The Phoenicians, undisputedly, the master merchants of the Mediterranean.